up here and press on the circle and click and hold with shift. I'm gonna go here, make a circle, and then I'm gonna deselect this. And let's say I want this to be aligned horizontally. I can go up to Window, go to Align, and I can go here to Align Horizontally and make this center. And so now we're going to set some keyframes to make this circle bounce up and down. So you can either go to Transform and set a keyframe on position, or you can press P. And before we do that, we're going to separate the dimensions of position. And so the reason that we separate the dimensions here is when we're working in the graph editor, it's a little bit easier to see just this one dimension of Y with the vertical motion and adjust the eases there instead of worrying about all of the position together. So we're going to start here. I'm going to go to something like 16 frames and bring this down here, almost to the bottom. And then I'm going to go back here. I'm going to copy this first keyframe. So I'm going to do Command C, Command V. And in this case, I'm going to bring this in a little bit so it happens a little bit faster. And I'm going to grab this keyframe. I'm going to make it go not quite as high. And the reason why is because this starts up here, and when it hits the ground, it goes back up, but not really with the same velocity that it had when it fell. So we're going to go here. I'm going to adjust this a little bit. And then I'm going to go a couple more frames. I'm going to copy and paste the circle hitting the ground again. And then go like this. Again, copy and paste. I'm going to bring this down a little bit more again because it's losing even more energy as it bounces. Then go back to this keyframe here, copy and paste. So the circle is hitting the ground again, and then I'm going to copy and paste. And again, I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And then I'm going to copy again. It's hitting the ground. I'm actually going to bring this in a little bit. Copy, paste. So we got this. It goes up a little bit more. I'm going to bring it down, and then one more hit on the ground before it stops. So you can see here, when I play this, it sort of feels like it's bouncing, but it's very robotic, doesn't have any personality, and we need to fix that. So this is where the graph editor comes in. So first, let's explain what are these keyframes? Like what does these keyframes mean? What does the shape mean? So these keyframes are called linear keyframes. And linear keyframes mean that when this object is traveling from point A to point B here, every single frame, if I zoom in, so you can see here, if I really zoom in, every single frame, it's traveling the same amount of distance to get from point A to point B. In this case, point A and point B are these two keyframes. What the graph editor allows you to do is you can change, instead of the spacing here, right? So I can change the spacing. Instead, the graph editor changes how you get from point A to point B instead of when you get there. So if I take this and I press F9, we will convert these into eased keyframes. And you'll see that the shape here is actually different. So instead of that diamond shape, we have kind of this hourglass shape. And if I play this, you can see that even though it doesn't feel like realistic, you can tell that there's a little bit more personality going on here. It's a little bit more complex. And if I go back here and go to keyframe interpolation, so you can see now this is Bezier. If I go back to linear, you can see this is very robotic feeling. So I'm going to select these again and press F9. And now we're going to open the graph editor. So I'm going to go back here This is the graph editor icon, and if I select this, you'll see this crazy graph shape, and it's kind of like a sine wave. And so what does this represent? What does this mean? So what this is representing is it's representing where this circle is at in time. And this graph is representing the coordinates. See y. See, this is green. So this is representing where this is at on the canvas at any given time. So you can see here, when we're at this frame, frame 16, we're at 962 pixels on the y. And if we go all the way here, you can see that at 1 second and 18 frames, we're at 962 pixels. So we can actually adjust this in the graph editor. So if I click on this keyframe, so these are actually keyframes. If I go back here, so you can actually adjust how keyframes are spaced in the graph editor. So if I were to click here and adjust this, you can see that I've kind of messed it up. And I can go back with Command Z, but if I play it, it looks like this. So what this represents, the steeper this line is, the faster this movement will happen. And the flatter this line, the slower the motion will be. So if I really drag this out, this motion will be really slow. And it'll start to speed up. And you can see here it kind of flattens out a little bit more. And so I can grab these and kind of move this however I want. If I move this handle all the way up here, the ball's going to start really fast and then slow down. See? Like this. But if I grab it like this, and you can also hold shift, and shift will snap it so that you kind of have a little bit more control. See, watch, shift. See how it snapped? So if I'm holding shift, I can drag this so that the motion starts slower. And again, I'm going to grab this handle here, and I'm going to hold shift and move it in. So you can see that what will happen is this value graph is representing really slow, and then it's traveling really quick. And so if I play this, you can see it really makes this crazy impact at the end because it's really just gaining velocity. And we can see that in the graph. And so we can adjust all of these handles and really get super customized animation. And so if I do the same thing here, I can grab this handle, and again, I'm holding shift, and I'm dragging this in. I'm going to do the same thing here. And so what this graph is representing is, you have slow, it's speeding up, and so it hits the ground, and then when it hits the ground, you want the motion to be really quick as it gets in the air. And as it's traveling in the air, it's going to slow down, and it'll just keep going. So you'll see. Boom, boom, boom. So I'm going to move this down a little bit. So I can kind of see that this almost looks like a bounce, this line. And if I continue to grab all these handles and move things in, and I'm pressing shift and holding it down as I adjust these, I can get motion that will feel a lot more realistic than what we had originally. So I'm going to grab all these, and you can also zoom in and really fine-tune these handles and kind of see what you're doing a little bit better if you need to. So if you need to zoom in or out, you can definitely do that. And you can also change the timing of these keyframes. So you can see here, these are all keyframes. So this is when it's in the air, another keyframe for when it's down, and then back up, and down, and back up, and down, back up, and vice versa. So I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit, just so I can see this a little bit more clearly. And then I'm going to grab these handles out here, like this. And I can also adjust this keyframe. So here I have this one keyframe selected. I'm holding shift, and I can move it. I can move this one. And you can also go back here. So if you want to leave the graph editor, I'm going to zoom out. So this is just my keyframes. And then this is my timeline with the value graph. And you can also move things here. But if I play this, the motion will feel a lot more natural. Just so you can see a little bit more clear, if I deselect that shape and play it, you can see that the circle is falling and it has more momentum as it falls, drops, comes back up, and then that motion is kind of decaying over time because it's losing momentum. So that's a very basic way to use the value graph in After Effects.